Okay, so over to you guys.
Okay, so welcome everybody to our first ever online Mugger Tea and Spanner, what we used to call our sessions, a Mugger Tea and Spanner. This is going to be a slightly different one because we're kind of playing with this at the moment. Normally it's a 3-hour session. We're going to try and squeeze this into just over an hour and then leave about 20 minutes for questions at the end. We're going to cover briefly an M check on this bicycle here. This is Neil. Say hello, Neil.
Hello.
So Neil is our mechanic, lead mechanic, and lead outreach trainer as well. So he's going to take us through the M check. Then we're going to look at taking tyres and tubes, changing those. We're going to look at brakes if we get a chance, and if we can, we're going to crack on and do chains as well. I'm not sure we're going to get all that done now, but we'll try our very best. If you've got any questions about Recyke-a-bike, the best thing to do is put them in the question box, as Chris was saying, and we'll answer them as you can. Look at our website, lots of information on there, and look at our social media. So I'd really like to crack on if we can. So Neil, are you ready, my friend? Okay, so Neil, intro, and off you go.
Well, I think they've already introduced me, so
yeah.
I'm Neil. So I think we'll just get started. First thing we'll do is an M check. So the M check is just a systematic check that you can do on the bike before you ride it to make sure everything's okay. This is a check that we teach when we're out at schools and bikeability and things like that as well. So some of the terminology is sort of geared at kids too, so but it's the best way to explain it. So I'll just start it. It's called an M check because we make it capital letter M on the bike. So we're starting at the front wheel, up to the handlebars, front of your chain, saddle, and then you do the back wheel. So it's a systematic check. So we start at the front wheel. There's two ways of fastening wheels. You've got either nut and bolt, which you just use a 15mm spanner, or you have this here, a quick release lever. See here, this has got close on it. You just want to see if you can open that with one finger. If that opens with one finger, it's too loose, and then we'll need to tighten that up. I'll talk about that in a bit. So that's the first check. If that opens up, your wheel's going to fall off and you're going to have a bad time. The next bit that we would check is the spokes. So if you've got any loose or damaged spokes, then your wheel will be weaker and it'll probably be buckled and you might find your brakes are rubbing as well. Easiest way to do that is just to run your hand around like that on both sides, and what you're looking for is any loose or broken spokes. So if you find any loose or broken spokes, any loose spokes, you'll feel it vibrate and it might make a dull thud. So that's all right. It's all right. Next bit is the rim. So the rim's the metal bit on the outside here, and what you want to do is check it for any big cracks, splits, or dents. If you've got a big crack or a split, well, it's not going to be very strong and it could collapse on you. And if it's got a big dent in it, there's a good chance it could catch the brakes, and then your brakes are going to rub, or the tyre won't actually be able to seat on the rim. So you're just looking at that, you don't need to touch that. Next bit, squeeze tyre. Make sure there's no big cracks, splits, or big cracks, splits, or big eggs on the tyre, or big bulge. If there's a wee rip in the tyre, then the tube inside tries to escape. So if that happens, it will get punctured. So, but give it a squeeze as well. If it's soft and squishy, like squeezing a banana, it's too soft. It should feel firm where it gives just a little bit. And the way I check for any bulges in the tyre, I just give it a wee spin. But also at the same time, I'm checking that my brakes aren't rubbing. So if I do that and the brakes are rubbing, then I know it's going to be a bit harder to cycle. So then we're up to the front brake here. So just to check the front brake, all we do is walk forward with right hand, move the front brake, back of the bike should lift. Okay. So you walk forward, pull the front brake, back should lift. And next bit, so that's working fine. Also, if it doesn't lift, then you've got a problem with your brake. Next bit to check is the handlebars. You'd be surprised how many bikes, and especially kids' bikes, are running around with loose handlebars. When new bikes come, they tend to come in a box, and the handlebars get turned so they can fit in the box, and people just tend to straighten them up, and then say, on you go. So squeeze the front wheel in between your knees, and then try and turn the handlebars. If the handlebars turn separately from the front wheel, then you need to tighten your bars. Let's say lots of kids run around with handlebars that can basically just come off. So when you get a bike in a box, you do need to tighten these up. Next thing to check for is, again, and this is a good thing to check on your kids' bikes, is do they have these plastic caps on the end? If they caps are gone, what can actually happen is every time, the way it happens is when the bikes get thrown down, it wears away, and eventually what you end up with is exposed metal handlebar end. But every time you put it down, it's kind of getting sharpened. And this actually happened to one of my friends at school. Fell off and he landed on the handlebar. The bar went into his leg. So we ran up to him, grabbed the bike. He had a big hole in his leg with bits hanging down, and his leg was still actually inside the handlebar.
Yeah.
So the wee caps cost about £1, £2 from any bike shop, so well worth it. That's checked the front. So now, next is check your pedals, make sure they're going to turn, because if they don't turn, you're going to have trouble keeping your feet on them. And if you just pedal the bike backwards to make sure the chain's on, and if you pedal the bike backwards, there's this sort of thing, then all that's happened is you've maybe changed gear without pedaling the bike. So all you need to do with that is lift the back of the bike, pedal it forward, that'll change gear, and then that's you. Then we're on to the saddle. So check the saddle, just make sure it's not going to tilt forward and back or side to side. That way it's not going to move when you're riding. So now we're on to the back wheel. So same as we check the front. I'll check the back brake first. So checking that, I'll walk backwards, go to the back brake, and the front of the bike should lift. Then we're on to the tyre. It's very similar to what we've done in the front. Give it a squeeze, make sure it's not too soft and squishy, and then also check for any big tears or bulges. And again, to check that, I spin the wheel towards the bike, because if I spin it backwards, the pedals get me in the shins. So spin it towards the front, and you're also checking your brakes aren't rubbing, that everything's free. Then, quick release. I'm getting there.
Oh, sorry.
We'll go to the rim first. Then check your rim on the back, make sure there's no big crack splits or dents as well. And the spokes, same as we've done the front. I'll just rush through these ones because we don't need it. And last bit is a quick release. So I did do that a bit hard on purpose to show it opening. But if it does that, we need to tighten that up. So for tightening the quick release, you see there it's got open on one side, it's hard to see, it's written in black. But then on this side, it has close, which you can't see in that one either because it's written in black. It's easier to see in the front. So maybe I'll do this with the front wheel.
Okay.
So you can see there, that one says close.
Oh, 26. Ah! Hang on, camera issues. There we go. There we go.
Right. So when you're tightening this up, you don't want it to turn this side. There's actually a nut on this side that you use to tighten it. So you turn that side there. Now, a good way of doing it is what I tend to do. If I put the skewer here about 90 degrees, and then you do this with the weight on the bike as well, and that way it's pushed right up into the drop out. And start turning this side.
Can you just bring the camera out a little bit because the sound's quite muffled?
Okay, how's that?
Yeah, that's better.
So yeah, if you put that at 90 degrees and then turn this side and still it starts to go tight, and then just with your palm push it over. You won't be able to see the gloves, but it should leave a slight imprint in your palm. But like I say, as long as you can't open that with one finger. Okay? Does that all make sense?
Yep.
So
that's an M check.
That's an M check. So we'll move on to the puncture repair. Or changing inner tube even. So, been out and I've got a puncture in my back wheel. So the first thing I want to do is this derailleur here there, it's actually sprung. So it's always sprung to sit in its hardest pedal gear. So the best thing to do is change it onto your hardest pedal gear, the little cog in the back, the highest number on the shifter, because that way all the tension is off this. And it also means when you put the wheel back on, you know which gear you're in. So change that back down onto the bottom gear. And then next bit is we'll need to disconnect our brakes. Because obviously the wheel won't, I mean, normally your wheel will be punctured, so you'll be able to get it out with the brakes connected, but you'll never get the wheel back in. So you want to disconnect your brakes first. To do that, this bit here is called the noodle. This needs to come out this little bit, the cradle here. So you can squeeze the brakes together, and then with your hand, just take the noodle out of that little cradle. And then that there, then they'll spring open and we can get the wheel out. So after this, now we just need to take the wheel off. So to do that, open up that quick release lever. You might have to unscrew it a couple of times, but you don't need to take it all the way off. Same with the front. On the front, the fork has actually got, there's more material there, so that if this is loose, the front wheel doesn't just fall off, so you need to unscrew the front a wee bit more. At the back, you only need to do a couple of turns. Then take the wheel out, you just lift the bike, and the wheel will start to fall out, and then just push it out. And then you see there the chain was all wrapped up round there. Just sometimes you need to just pull that back and then lift the bike up. Pull that back out the way. Because the tyre was inflated, the brake was getting caught in the brake. And that's us, the wheel is out. Now I don't ever put the bike upside down. The reason for that is if you've got anything on your handlebars, it's going to get damaged. Bells, lights, computers, anything like that. And if you've got a road bike, dropped handlebars, you can scratch all the shifters. So now just lay the bike down on the ground, chain side facing up. We don't want to lay it down with the chain side down because this here, called the derailleur, it changes and goes side to side through your gears. So if that gets bashed, then your gears stop working. So now we're going to take the tyre off. So to do that, we need tyre levers. So you don't get a bunch of repair kit. Well, these ones have tyre levers in them. This one's empty. So these types have tyre levers in them. But I'm going to have to let the air out of this first. Just give me a second. That's the air out of it. So I'm just going to use the tyre just to make sure that the wheel anymore.
So, sorry, the sound's got a bit muffled again there. Could you repeat?
I just give the tyre a wee squeeze to get the bead off the rim. So, because basically what we want to do is with our tyre levers, you want to start away from the valve because it makes it easier. You've got your little tyre lever there with the hooked end on it, and then there's a little hook on that end, but that hooked end there, that goes underneath the tyre to take the tyre off. So all I do is I pull the tyre back like that to show the bead there, get my tyre lever, put it in underneath the bead there, and then just lever it over like that. Now that wee hook that's on this end, there we go, I just hook that onto the spoke and that holds that first one in place. Then what we want to do, get our next tyre lever and do the same again. But if you try and do it from say here, it won't work because you're trying to stretch that bead over all that gap there. So the easiest way to do it, the closer you can go to that first tyre lever, the easier it's going to be to take the tyre off. But do the same again, and as close as you can, and then lever that over. And then you can just take that out and then do the same again, and just keep working along, taking little tiny bites, like that. And then once you get to a certain point, the tyre gets quite a bit looser. And then what you can do is just hold the tyre lever in, and run it round. You see what I do there is I do it round to there, and then I take it out and remove the tyre, because, well, you just saw a slip there, and if I do it here and just trying all the way around, then I'll punch the ground. And that's it. So that's one side of the tyre off. You only need to take one side off, you don't need to take the full tyre off. And then take a tube out. This one's got a little lock ring on it. Just take that out. Now here, if you've got a puncture and you're out, the best thing to do is take the tube out and then lay the tube down on top. Because what you want to do is find out where the hole is before you put your new tube in. Because there might actually be something stuck in the tyre that's caused it to puncture. So if you take the tube out, lay it on top, you probably have if you're out, probably want to have a little mini pump like that if you're riding this one here. You can extend it. So I'll just use this because this is what we have when we're out. I'll use the track pump though when we're going. So should explain about pumps. Some pumps will work different ways. So some pumps you start with a lever lifted up, put it on and close it. And some pumps you put them on like that, and then you lift the lever up to tighten it onto the valve. The easy way to tell which way it should be, when it's open and ready to go on to the valve, the pump has a little bit of play in it, the little lever. Whereas if it's locked, where it should be gripping the valve, you can't move that easily. So what you want to do, blow the tube up. This is just so you can find the hole. The more you put in it, the easier it'll be to find the hole, unless obviously it's a really big hole, in which case you'll probably be able to spot it easy enough. But then what I do is that the old way of doing this is to submerge the tube in water. But believe it or not, in Scotland you might not find a puddle. So the other way is your top lip is actually really sensitive. So what I do is I actually also roll up my sleeves because I sometimes feel the air coming out in my arms. And I hold the tube like that, just up close to my mouth, and then just work my way around like that. See, I'll either feel it in my top lip if I don't feel it in my arms going all the way around. And then once you find the hole, so say the hole's there, so say it's there, then get your tube, line it back up, and you want to inspect this part with the tyre. And if you've took it out and you've not realised you've turned it, you might have turned it round, then you would check that part and that part, just to make sure you're getting the right bit. So check the tube, check the tyre, check the outside and the inside. There might be a thorn stuck into it. I've had it before where I kept on getting punctures, and what I didn't realise, there was actually a thorn stuck in between the tread. So when I put the new tube in, it all seemed fine, and it sat there and it was fine until I rode it, because then the thorn would puncture the new tube again. So check the outside of the tyre, but also check the inside of the tyre. Now what some people will do is they'll get their hand and just run around it like that. Not such a great idea, because if there's a bit of glass or something stuck in there, you're going to rip fingertips open. So just maybe feel nice and gently inside and visually check the outside. What some people will do as well is they'll have like a little bit of a cloth in with them, and they'll maybe just run around it with a cloth, because the cloth will snag. Okay, so once you've found that, make sure your tyre's clear, then get your new tube. Now you actually do want to put a little bit of air into your tube. When you get a new tube, it will be folded up, so there'll be no air in it at all, and just flap around. So what you actually want to do is put a little bit of air in it with your pump. This has got too much in it, because I was going to have to show you the way to find the hole. But you want it going up maybe about that much. Just enough for it to about hold its shape. When you're putting the tube back in, just find the hole, So I've got it at the top there. There's two ways you can do it. I prefer to just hold the tyre over like that, grab the valve with my fingers, and I put it inside the tube, and I've found the hole for the rim there, and then I just that down through into there. The other way to do it, some people sort of pull the tyre back like that so they can actually see it, so that they can put it down in it easily, but then you just have to lift the tyre over the tube. Then all you do, put the tube in, that's it, put it back in. So what you actually want to do, when you put this back on, I don't know if you can see this, but around the tube there, you see that? There's a difference in how the tube looks. There's actually a thicker bit of rubber here to allow them to mount that valve onto the tube. So that bit there around the valve has got a thicker bit of rubber. So what you want to actually do, stick this back in. When you're putting the tyre back on, you want to actually push the valve back up so that that thick bit, you can make sure that that's right up there into the tube. And that way, you can be sure that it's going to seat correctly. So this bit of the tyre here, it'll be hard to see in the camera, but it's slightly hooked, and the inside of the rim's hooked, so you just need to hook them in together. So push that up, and then with your fingers, just pull the tyre over the rim like that. Now you need to do both sides at the same time, because if you do just one side, you see there, it just comes out, and all you do is take it. And work your way around. Now, tyres do get tight.
I'm sorry, but the sound's gone a bit muffled again. Could you just repeat that last little sentence there that you said? You're doing it both at the same time, yeah?
Yeah. So you're doing both thumbs at the same time. But when you get to the last bit here, that's where it's going to start getting more difficult. There's two ways to do it. If you can do it without using the tyre lever, that's what's best. So, but what I tend to do is it's kind of like bringing out a hill. I just want to pull the tyre over the rim. So I tend to find that pull it down towards me, it helps. So what I tend to do is put my hand underneath, and I roll the tyre back, and I get the next hand in, and then I roll that back as well. And I just keep working my way along, rolling the tyre back. While one hand is getting another grip, the other hand stays where it is to hold everything in place. And then you just keep working your way along until they're put on. What you can do, what a lot of people will do, is they'll actually use a tyre lever to pop it back on. So there, when it's like that, this tyre isn't actually too tight. So what some people will do is they'll put the tyre lever, they turn it round the other way, put the tyre lever in, and then just leave it over like that. But if you do that, you run the risk of nipping the tube with the tyre lever. And if you do that, you put a hole in the tube, then you need to start it all over again. Which is why we say best to not use that if you don't need to. All right, just put this little lock ring back on.
Neil, can you tell me why you put the lock ring back on? Because some people don't, do they?
The reason that if this was like a deep rim, like a big deep rim, then sometimes when you try to put the pump on, the valve disappears into the tube. So with that lock ring there, it's not going to disappear. That's basically it.
Brilliant.
And then we're ready to inflate the tyre. Or you can inflate it on the bike, but we'll just inflate it just now. Now, it's actually written on the tyre what you should inflate the tyre to. Some places it's easier to see than the others. In fact, there it is there. So it'll be hard to see because again, it's just sort of stamped into the rubber. But you see there, so what does it say? So there it's written there. 30 to 65 psi. So it needs to go somewhere in between 30 and 65 psi. The higher volume tyres run lower pressures, but your narrow tyres like hybrids and road bikes, they run higher pressures. So a mountain bike, you're generally running 30 or 40 psi. Hybrid, you're talking between 60 and 80 psi. Road bike, 100 to 120. And bear in mind, your cars only run 30. And if it's a track bike, like going around the velodrome, it's about 200 psi. So when one of them bursts, you know all about it. So I'll just pump this up.
Now, what kind of pump is that?
This is a track pump. So for when you're out on the ride, you want the little mini pump, because that's the sort of get you home. Like with this pump here, you're never going to get that. You're never going to get your road bike up to 120 psi. You'll struggle even maybe sometimes to get your mountain bike up to pressure. So it's basically just keep going with it until it's hard enough to get you home. Whereas in the house, you probably want one of these. They're much quicker, and it tells you the pressure on them, so you can get up to the correct pressure.
Chris, have you got one of those at the tool library?
Unfortunately, we've got a foot pump, but it only does the Schrader type of valve, annoyingly. So we don't have anything for Presta if you've got a road bike or anything like that. But
yeah, the thing is with these pumps, they've got the heads on them to do both. And a lot of people don't know this as well. These mini pumps, if you buy a mini pump, most of them will actually do both valve types. All you have to do is if you unscrew that bit, and basically it then shows you the internals. And you just need to take that out, and then you've got another wee plastic bit there, and you just basically turn them around. So, which way was it? Sure, it's that way. So you just turn everything around about. There'll be instructions on your pump on how to do this as well. But then that's it now. That's that set up for a Presta valve.
I'm going to double check our pump on the library, but I'm pretty sure it is just Schrader, but it is a Halford's bicycle pump, so
It should do both.
It should do both.
It should.
Both.
Yeah, we'll have a look.
For those that
I'll email that out to everyone.
That's the Presta valve that we're talking about. So that's what most of your road bikes or high pressure tubes will have. They'll have that type. But other than that, the other valve is a Schrader valve, which is the same as a car valve. So that's fuel pumped up. So we'll just put it back on. So the way I take to do this is I hold the bike by the saddle, just get my wheel, and what you want is I just roll it forward, and this bit here hanging down, you want that underneath the foot. And then you just want to drop the gear down onto the gear that you were on. And then if you push in the back of the derailleur, well, this is a SRAM one, so it's a bit different. Get it lined up, on the brakes. And this one I need to just pull it back like that out the way, and then the wheel falls down. Now there it just fell into place. But all I do, because the weight of the bike's on it, all I have to do is pull the wheel back and just make sure that it's all the way up on both sides into the drop out. So make sure it's all the way up on both sides. Sometimes what you'll see, if you see there, you can see actually where it's been sitting before. So if you put the wheel down and you see it sits maybe like that, you need to check it because that's not sitting in right. So make sure it sits all the way up. But if you've got the weight of the bike on it, it should sit straight. And then we just tighten up our quick release. So again, just hold that at 90 degrees and then tighten that up and then close that over. And then just check it as well with your one finger. and make sure that's tight enough. The way that I put these quick releases, they actually go slightly past 90 degrees. This one's not as easy to see. So if it's not past 90 degrees, make sure it's closed over. I tend to either have it facing back, or I will tend to try and have it into the middle there like that. The reason for that is then it's tucked out the way. If you're mountain biking and you've got it hanging down like that, there is a chance that you can catch it off a rock and it opens the wheel. So I just try and either have it tucked in there where the frame will stop it from getting hit, or I have it pointing back, because in that case, anything's just going to glance off it and it's not.
Now, sometimes we see people come in and quick releases are going up the way, up to the seat tube, on the seat stay.
Yeah, so sometimes people will just close them over. And it's actually maybe against here, or it's against here. But it doesn't, that way it's stopping it from, potentially stopping it from closing all the way over. But also, you can't get your fingers in to get it off afterwards, so it makes it much more difficult. So as well as it not being closed over, it makes it much harder to open. Excellent. And then don't forget to reconnect your brakes. So squeeze them together, to put them back in. I tend to just pull the noodle, pull that side all the way over, and then push that in, and something's not right here. What's happened? See there? I don't know if you've seen that there. The cable had popped out of the lever, so it was sitting there just like that. So that's why I wasn't getting the cable. So just, if that comes in, just make sure that doesn't pop out, and then this will be easier now. There we go. And that's the wheel back on. Yeah.
Perfect. Good job.
Take questions on that, or
should we do all questions at the end, and then what time have we got? Let's have a look. Can you shout with hydraulic brakes as on the questions?
Hydraulic brakes. There's not.
Well, that'll be discs. So I'm guessing. Does that mean discs?
It'll be discs, yeah, because there's only good at hydraulic rim brakes.
Yeah. Yes, discs.
If we've got time at the end, I'll grab a bike with hydraulics and show you. There's not much we can do, because with hydraulic brakes, every manufacturer has a different way of bleeding the brakes. So whether it's Shimano, Avid, Magura, they're all different. So we could spend like 3 hours just talking about bleeding hydraulic brakes and still not cover everything. But there is a couple of things I can show you that are maybe just recentering your brakes and things like that, to stop them rubbing.
I think we might not have time to do that, but we've certainly got time to show how to put a back wheel on with a disc brake, rather than, because we've shown how to put a back wheel on with a V brake.
Well, I mean, it's exactly the same, except you don't need to worry about the brakes here. The only difference is your caliper sits here, and there's a slot in the caliper. You just need to make sure the disc goes into that slot. There's not really much more to it than that.
Does that answer your question? I hope so. Shall we start looking at brakes now?
I guess as well, sorry to interrupt there, but I guess as well, like if we don't get time to do that today, then there's potentially videos on YouTube, but like you say, maybe if you write in your specific manufacturer in the search when you're doing that.
Yeah, all the manufacturers for the brakes, they tend to have their own videos showing how you bleed the brakes. So if you go on YouTube, search for your manufacturer, like Shimano or something, or Avid, and you'll actually find that videos from them on how to bleed brakes. So follow them, because there's lots of good videos on YouTube, but there's also lots of bad videos. And if you make sure you get one from the manufacturer, then you can be sure you're actually doing the right thing.
Yeah. Also, there's that generic one in the Park Tool. It's on the Tool website. And Park Tool talk just about Park Tools and their particular tool that does a particular job. So yeah. Right.
So brakes now, yeah?
Yeah.
Right. I'll put bike in the stand for this one. It's much easier to work with a bike if you've got a stand. If you do have a stand at home, you want to grab it by the seat post. If you can mark your frame, and also if there's any cables running along your frame, you don't want to clamp it there, because if you clamp in the cables, then it stops everything working. and then it doesn't make sense when you work on it. But if you put the seat up, and grab it by the saddle if you can, that's the best place. So I just hold it with one hand there. Now, if you do have a stand, have the chain side facing out, because it's more likely this is the side you're going to work on. Also, you want to angle the stand as well. Now, I do want the front wheel pointed down a wee bit, but not that much. You don't want it up, because if it's up at the front end, the bars basically swing round and hit you in the back of the head. So if you have it pointing down, and you always return back to straight. So, brakes. So we'll talk about V-brakes. V-brakes are the most common type of brake. I'll do the back brake because then Phil can get into us a bit. It's easier for it to see. Right. Give me a second. Never mind. So I'm going to disconnect these brakes. So I'm just going to squeeze them together. Sometimes I just pull a noodle and then use that finger there and I can pop them out. And actually the brake pads on this are really quite worn. So this here is a worn brake pad. You can see there, it's almost down to the metal. There are wear lines on them, which I will take this pad off and I'll show you. Just do my Allen key. I'll take this pad off because it's a bit better. I'm just going to take this off first. Now what to do, you'll see there's different size spacers here. Look at these spacers before you take them out and what order they're in, because there's a big spacer and a little spacer, and you want to put them back on as they were before. So even sometimes if you just take a photo on your phone, so that when you put it back together, you know how it looks. It's quite fiddly this, and there's lots of little bits. Now this is really quite a worn brake pad as well. But you see there, you can still see the grooves in them. The rule of thumb is, if you can still see the grooves, then it's okay. It's still got some life left in it. If you can't see the grooves, like the other one that I just showed you, that one, then you need new brake pads, you're down to the metal. But there is also, it'll be hard to see in that one, because it's worn past it, but there is also normally a little line actually right there where it's worn to that says wear line on it. So if you can see the little line that says wear line, then you've still got life left. But if it's gone and you can't see any grooves, you need new pads. If you leave it without the pads, then under here is just metal, and you end up grinding metal on metal, and it actually wears away the rim. So if you don't change the brake pads and you just keep riding it, and whenever you're braking you hear grinding, you're actually grinding away your wheel, and eventually you'll have to change your brake pads and your wheel. So you're best to keep on top of them, because then you don't need to spend any money on a wheel. So, as I said, you have your brake pads here. And you always drop a bit.
Always.
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 So, you see you have here, so that's the nut. You've got a big cup here, and then you've got a little cup. You've got a cone, and I must have dropped the other one because it's not there. You should have two cones.
I didn't hear it bang.
I didn't hear it drop.
No.
No. It was definitely there though, and you've got a spacer. But I really need this other cone to do this.
Do you want to go and get another pad?
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, let's just get a new set of pads and just change them.
Run through the shop and get some. So while Neil's just running through to the shop there, getting another set of pads, so you need to change them anyway, and we've dropped a bit. You will always drop a bit, by the way, when you're changing them. So you really need... Oh, I thought I'd just seen it. Yeah, so make sure you've got a good surface. If you're doing it outside in the garden and you do it on grass, you're not going to find it probably. so just think about that. So I just saw a question about contaminated discs, and it's not actually the disc. Well, it is the disc and pads If the disc is contaminated, the pads are. It's as simple as that. And it's probably the biggest thing that I've seen is people say, I've got squeaky brakes and I put a bit of oil on it. Well, then you've just made your brake into, well, nothing. It's not going to be a brake because you've oiled your braking surface. You often see that is something we see regularly, that someone's put a bit of WD-40 on their disc to make it stop squeaking. What you need to do is you need to get that disc cleaned, first of all. You need to remove the pads. There are many pads, many different types of shape and size. You've just had Neil talk about different types. You'll need to remove those. You might even have to clean the housing itself. You can get disc pad cleaner, brake cleaner from anywhere, all the local bike shops. If you're not going to go to your local bike shop, then you can go online. Please support your local bike shop if you can, but if you can't go online, get yourself a can of it, spray everything, just give it a really good clean. If it's not clean, you're just going to recontaminate it by putting new pads in. It's going to get recontaminated again. You're going to have the same issue. The disc has to be properly cleaned. Keeping it clean, well, don't put any oil on it. Any oily stuff is at the end of your day when you've been riding, and give your bike a really good clean with water. Don't use any oily based cleansers. What else would you clean your brake pads with? You reckon your disc with it at the end of a ride? Neil, would you clean your disc and brakes at all? You wouldn't, would you?
Not really. Well, water, if anything.
Exactly, just a bit of water. So if you're going to put anything on there, it's going to have what you call carry. It's going to carry on it, and that's going to start contaminating your disc, your pads again, and you're going to be in the same position. So just if you're going to put anything on there at all, if you're going to just quickly jet wash your bike over if you've been out in the muck.
You never ever jet wash your bike.
Yeah, no. When I mean jet wash, I mean just give it like a squirt with a hose. Obviously not with a power wash. I didn't mean a power wash. And just hose it down. Don't put any detergents into or oils or anything like that into your discs because they're just not going to work. It's just not going to work.
That's when you find that your brakes squeal and they don't actually stop you. With disc brakes, that'll normally mean they're contaminated. Where, as Phil's saying, you've either I've heard people try to cure their squeaky brakes by putting oil, WD-40 on the discs, which just ruins it. Because as I say, oil will fill them, and the pads are porous as well. So any oil that gets onto that disc then contaminates the pads as well. And because the pads are porous, they just work their way all the way through. So the only thing you should ever put in your disc brake is the actual proper disc cleaner. But make sure it's bike disc cleaner, because if sometimes car disc cleaner actually has oil in it because they work at much higher temperatures, so they can just burn it off, because these don't. So you want to make sure you've got proper bicycle brake disc cleaner. That's the only thing you should ever put on your discs. To be honest, I don't generally tend to wash them. If anything, it's just a wee bit of water over them. Yeah. Just to wipe off any dirt.
Yeah, I just got the hose out. I just got hose down. Does that answer your question about the discs? The question that I saw? Hopefully it does.
So, anyway, sorry. Here are some new brake pads. You see these actually have stamped on them L and R, and with an arrow pointing towards the front.
Let's just get that.
So they're quite easy. And you see there, lots and lots of grooves, lots of life left. Okay, so let's put these on. So on this one, I was talking about the cones. The big cup, is in the inside there. So that one's been left on. So I know that one's the big cup, so this one will be the same. So the cups and cones, the reason that they're there is, so you've got a cup and the cone can actually go inside, and you see there that can move around, and that's what actually allows you to adjust the angle of the pads. So the cones go inside the cup. So the way we do that, so let's say just keep an eye on what you've already got there though. Big cup and then a cone. And then we'll put that onto the caliper. This metal arm here, that's called a caliper. So I just line that up, I'll put that on, and this is where it gets fiddly and you sometimes drop bits, because now what I have to do is get my other cup and cone. Whoa. There we go, dropping it again.
Told you always drop them.
So I'm just going to feed that on. I'm holding it there and I'm just
holding that cone on with my thumb, and then cup over the top. And in this spacer here, that's just so that when you're tightening it up, it helps prevent the pad turning as you try to tighten it. And then screw that on. So that's it in place. So now we need to line it up against the rim and make sure the angles are okay. Now, as I say, with this loose, the angle can move around. So the easiest way to do it is just use your thumb to push over the caliper and then push it up against the rim. Now, you don't want it too low where it's sitting underneath the rim, because then if it is, it will wear with the lip, and then eventually the lip gets jammed under the rim and your brakes rub. But also you don't want it too high where it's going to hit the tyre, because obviously it's going to be a lot harder to cycle and it's going to damage the tyre. So try and get that in the middle. What I'll tend to do, I need to look.
Sorry, go.
So I'll just push that over, and that's it now lined up. So now I have to get my Allen key. If I keep this held over, the pad doesn't move. But I'm going to grab with my finger, and what I'm actually doing is I'm sticking my finger underneath there, and that's just to stop it from rotating. Sorry, it's hard to see, but
it's very hard. Just trying to get the right angle. Is that the right angle? I'm not sure it is, but I'll do.
And then just tighten that up. So now it's on there. If I'll do it this way, there we go.
That's good.
There we go. And then holding it in place, and just tighten that up. And that's us. That's one pad done.
Terrific. I've got that's 10 to 3 to chain next.
Well, I'm not finished with the brake.
I know, but I mean, rather than go through the whole brake again, the second brake, just do the
Yeah. I'm not going to. Obviously, you're going to change both pads. I'm not going to, because we've not got time for that. So, and now that I've put this pad and it's got more life on it, I need to actually a little bit of cable out. Okay, so this here is a spring. So if that pops out, you need to make sure that goes back under there. So that's what makes the caliper spring. I'll explain that in a second. Flipping a tiny bit out. There we go. Pull that through. Now, I've actually got that brake pad a little bit high, so I'm just going to readjust that now. So sometimes I find you have to do this once you've hooked it all up. You need to just readjust it, but it's a bit easier once the wheel's on, once the brake's all back together. So again, just lining it up. Same again. Right, so that's our pad on. You see now, when I'm pulling the brake, because this pad's got more life, it's not having to move as far anymore. You see this side is moving lots, and this side's hardly moving any. But it means this pad's also really close to the rim from rubbing. So I need to adjust the bias. So if I show you this, so this caliper here, this is what it looks like underneath. So you see there, that's just a spring. And that screw there, that basically pushes against the spring and turns it. But that's actually plugged into the bike there. So as that screws in, it adds tension to that spring. So whatever side isn't moving, if you screw that side in, it adds more spring to the caliper, and it'll let you adjust the bias. But what you want is both arms moving the same amount, and both pads hitting the rim at the same time. So, my screwdriver.
On the floor.
Oh, yeah, there. So, if I screw this in, this will adjust, this will make this more springy, but also what it does is it will sometimes pull the brake pads out a little bit so that it's more centred, so the wheel can sit more centre, and it can stop it rubbing. So if I screw that in, and then hopefully we should start to see this side. There we go. That's it moving a lot more. that actually looks pretty good to me from here. There we have, no rubs. Perfect. And that's brake pad changed and the bias sorted, so the wheel runs nicely and it doesn't rub. Does that all make sense?
Perfect, yep. Thumbs up there, thumbs up. Right, should we quickly talk about cleaning and lubricating chains, Neil, sorry. So I'm just thinking about my son for a second, I don't know why, just
Right.
my son's name just came into my head, sorry.
So, lubing our chains. So a couple of different types of lube. So we have this stuff here, TF2, this is wet lube, just in a big bottle, a little dropper. And you also have this stuff, it's TF2, but this is a lubricant spray. You also get dry lube. We always use wet lube. Dry lube, it is brilliant. Basically, you spray it on and it dries and sort of forms a wax. And it's great because it can last a really long time, but it gets washed off in the rain. So in Scotland, it doesn't always work that well, unless we have a really nice summer. So we always tend to use wet lube because it still gets washed off, but it takes longer. Okay. So I prefer the dropper stuff myself, but if you've got a kind of spray lube, if you've got disc brakes, don't spray it on there. Because even if you spray it at an angle like that, and this, it all mists up when you spray it. So even if you're spraying it directly down and you're keeping it away from the disc, it can still mist up, and then it gets wee droplets of oil on the disc, and then your brakes stop working. So if you're going to use the spray, do it on the front, do it on there. And don't spray it into the side like that, because that's where all your bearings are that allow it to turn. Just spray it down directly onto the chain. You just pedal the bike backwards and just spray it down. You don't want too much. And what you actually want to do in the end is get a bit of blue roll or an old rag. The rag's probably best. And then just wipe off any excess lubricant. Now, the reason you're doing that is if this has too much oil on it, any grit, dirt, stuff like that from the roads or from a trail will stick to the chain. And you've probably seen it before where people have, their chain is completely black, and all these jockey wheels, even this one's got too much on it, has like big bits, it all ends up gummed up. So this one's not too bad. So if you wipe off the excess and stop that grime from building up, because it's all grit and dirt, it's basically a grinding paste. So as you're cycling the bike, you're basically just grinding everything away on it. So you want to try and keep the chain clean. For cleaning your chain, you can get like little, I used to have one. You can get like little boxes that basically you can plug around the chain there, and it's got a little bath, and you just fill up the bath with a little bit of degreaser, and you basically turn the wee wheel and it drags the chain through, and it's got lots of little brushes and it cleans the chain. But they're like £25–30. And I think they're a bit excessive.
They're not always that effective either, are they?
No, they're not all that effective. No. What I actually tend to do is just split the chain, fill up a little bit of degreaser and bought me a 2 litre bottle, and drop the chain inside, close it, shake it, and then I'm done. Wipe it off, and then that's it. But an easier way to do it, even if you've just got an old rag, spray your degreaser onto your rag, and then just basically pedal the bike backwards, and that will start bringing the chain up, and then just change it over every now and again. Until you're happy you've got it a bit cleaner. Now that's a way quickly cleaning the chain. If there's not too much grime built up, it does clean it. You can see here it's actually already started to make the chain a bit shinier, but it is an old chain, so there you go.
Chris has just said this is where you really want to wear gloves, and he's absolutely right.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah,
because you get that stuff will stay on your fingers for days.
Where did I put that bottle? Over there. So this is the stuff I prefer to use. Just that it's a bit thicker, sometimes it lasts a bit longer, but at the same time it's not too thick. So the way you do this the important part of the chain being oiled, these side plates here, they don't really matter because it's these little rollers there. That's the bit that really matters. That's the part that wears. Because the rollers sit into the teeth of the cassette and on the chain rings, it's actually in here that they wear. So the oil, the lubricant really needs to be on the rollers. So you can just drop it on, and you just want to drop it on each individual link. So you're just squeezing it gently and just pedal the bike backwards until you've made sure you've got a little bit of oil on every single link. And if you do it the way I've done it there, putting it on top, you need to just give it a second for it to work its way down. Or some people will just do it there and pedal the bike backwards, because that's the bit there that actually needs oiled. But I find it a lot easier to end up just pouring it all over the floor.
Yeah, you probably don't want to do this on your mum's front room carpet. That doesn't work very well.
Yes.
Your mums get pretty upset when you drop oil all over your mum's carpet. Or your partner's, or your loved one.
And same again, even though it's fresh oil, wipe off the excess to stop the grit and dirt sticking to it and ending up with that big gunky mess. But you see there, it's actually already dripping off, so there's way too much on it. I'm sure Jill will be happy. So I'm just wiping off the excess. You see there, it's all spraying up with things. Until you're quite happy. And basically all you do is lean a slight film, a thin film basically onto the rollers. And that's it.
Now, some people talk about a stretched chain. What does a stretched chain mean?
So, yeah, people talk about either cable stretch or chain stretched. Now, it doesn't actually stretch, because if metal stretches, it's going to break. It doesn't spring back. So they don't actually stretch. In the case of cables are basically tightly wound bits of wire. And with cables, when you pull them, they just unwind slightly, and so they get a little bit longer. So if you've got a new cable on it, once you've used it a little bit, well, they get a little bit longer. They call it cable stretch, but it's not actually stretching. With chains, and if we talk about chain stretch, again, it's not stretching, but what it is these little bits here, material's worn away from inside. So once that starts to get worn, because it's basically metal on metal, some material gets missing from in there, and that gap in there actually maybe gets a millimetre longer. But you times that by every single link in the chain, and it's a huge amount of space that you're losing out the chain. So it means then that the chain can't grip into the teeth as well as it did before. So the chain starts basically slipping over the top of it. But it's not actually getting stretched, it's worn on the inside. Does that make sense?
And how about, I've heard about shark's teeth on the chain ring.
Ah, right. So if you look at this chain ring here, you see here, this one's all right. It's got a nice smooth curve to it. And they should actually be slightly flat on top. So this one is a little bit worn, but that's still okay. But if you see, it's more like a shark fin. If you see sort of a wavy tooth, and it's pointed back like that, then it's worn and it needs to be replaced. So if you see like shark teeth or shark fin on these chain rings, then it's worn and you're going to need to replace it. And it does, unfortunately, like the chain and cassette in the back, they wear together. So if this is worn, that's going to be worn as well. Does that answer that?
Yeah. So if you're going to replace a chain, cassette or freewheel's got to change with it.
Yeah.
That would be the best advice.
The way that you can check that, I've got a chain checker here. I brought Rory's through with a bit of paper. That is. So this here is a chain checker.
Yeah.
So this is the one I prefer to use because, well, it's got a smiley face and a sad face. So it's nail proof. So to check the chain with this tool, all you have to do is pop that in that side. So this side, that's the sad face. So basically, if this falls all the way through, then it needs replaced. So you see there, it's not falling all the way through, but it's really close. Now this actually has marks on it. It says 1.8.6. If you say that's of a mil, basically worn away out of there. So that's actually, that's nearly a mil gone from in there. Mind I was saying earlier about the stretch, it's actually the material is gone from in here. So this measures how much material is gone. So this one, actually it's now, yeah, that's fallen all the way through. So this chain needs replaced on this bike. Zoom in on that. There you go. But yeah, I would have to change the chain and the cassette on the back as well, because otherwise it's just going to slip. If you'd snapped your chain for it, and say I put this on and it's only half worn, you'll often get away with just putting a chain on and leaving the cassette. If it's any more than halfway worn on these tools, then it won't work. Mm-hmm. And again, you'll normally get maybe 2 or 3 chain rings on the front. To one set of chain rings, you maybe get 2 or 3 chain and cassettes, because these are made out. These are a bit tougher. Obviously, it depends on the bike as well and the quality. So if this had the shark's teeth, I would have to change them all at the same time.
So you talked about cassette. What's the difference between a cassette and a freewheel?
Probably easiest to show that.
Okay.
So if you give me a...
Yep, okay. So while Neil's just getting another wheel, he's going to get a freewheel wheel to show you the difference between a cassette and a freewheel. So do we have any other questions at the moment that we can start off with what we've covered? We've covered changing a tube. We've done the M-check. Then we did changing a tube. And then we did changing a V-brake. And we talked briefly about discs. And then we've looked at cleaning and lubricating a chain. So have we generated any questions yet? Has anybody got something very keen to ask?
There was one slightly not quite on that topic, but from Roddy. Any tips on cleaning dirty rags, when to give up on a rag, and the best way to dispose of a rag?
That's a really good question in some ways. Depends on your partner, really, doesn't it, and their washing machine. I tend to, if they're like really heavily soiled, I chuck them. I tend to use them once and once only, because if I put my Ollie rags in my wife's washing machine, well, it's my washing machine, then, one, I'm going to have clothes with bits of oil on them, and 2, I'm going to have a very unhappy partner who's going to demand I go and buy a new washing machine. So I tend to go for the cheaper option and chuck the rags. I'll keep old T-shirts and stuff. Instead of throwing old clothes away, cut your old clothes up into rags. That's what we do here. We use old towels, old T-shirts, or whatever, when they're funny, when they've reached their kind of point where you're not going to wear them anymore. And they're not, you can't really recycle them as such, because they're not going to be worn by anybody else. Cut them up and use them as rags. And then when the rag's done, it's done. If you can wash it briefly in warm soapy water to get the worst out, and it's going to last, then that's fine. But do you know what? If you've got I've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of old T-shirts, and I use that. Does that answer your question, Roddy?
I also have various stages of soiled rags. So if I use one to do sort of a clean job the first time, I use that a couple of times, and then when it starts getting dirty, then it becomes the initial chain cleaning rag. So sort of go through. I mean, I'm a Yorkshireman, so I'm pretty tight. So if I can use something more than once, I will do.
Absolutely, yeah. When I say, I'll keep a rag for a few weeks. I mean, literally, it will start off as cleaning my frame a little bit, and then it'll move, as you say, slowly towards the sort of the chain and once I'm working on the chain with it, it's days are numbered pretty much.
And coming back to something you said earlier as well, don't if you use something to clean oil off, then don't go into any of the brakes with it afterwards.
Oh, massively, yeah. I mean, at Recyke-a-bike, we see so many bikes come in with things that, they're just common mistakes. And the biggest common mistakes with discs is people putting WD-40 because there's that funny squeaking noise, and they're like, they're very, very noisy. So I put some oil on and bang, it's done. The other one is, like you say, another one is actually spraying degreaser into particularly a free wheel. And what it does is it strips the bearings out of the wheel, out of the hub. And then the hub's wrecked and the wheel's wrecked. And we have to, it depends on how long they ride it, whether we can save the wheel or not. to be honest though, when I first started doing this stuff, I did exactly that to my wife's bike, and I sprayed degreaser. Her chain looked really clean, and so did the cassette. But a couple of weeks later, I had to buy a new wheel. So yeah, that's another common one. What Neil talked about, when we were doing the M check, we talked about wear lines on the wheel. I'm just going to show you something on this rear wheel. Let's see if I can find. See on the wheel there, you can see a wear line here. Is a line, and you can physically run your fingernail into it. On the rim, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Now that's the wear line. Now the reason I'm telling you is this: is a long time ago, I had a really nice road bike, and I've had some really nice wheels from Al at Wheelcraft, and I kept riding them through the winter, and they were alloy, and my pads and road grit and water basically wore that away, that rim, and it got to the point where that was becoming concave, and that line disappeared, and I didn't pay that much attention to it. Then the sidewalls became concave, and then one day as I was riding along, the wheel physically exploded and it tore itself in half, and I stopped on the very spot. I mean, that was it. It locked up, and it was a front wheel, and so yeah, I did this amazing Superman dive. But I would recommend really, really checking that rim mark on it, and if it's not there, just run your finger along, and what you're trying to find is that concave. If it's flat and square, then that's fine. But if there's a physical, you can feel a physical dent in it, then you really need to stop riding that bike until you get a new wheel. Right, mate. Sorry.
Right.
Go back.
So sorry. We've got freewheel and a cassette. So I don't have a freewheel wheel just now, but this here is a freewheel. So you see here, the easy way to tell is the bearings are actually built into this one, and it's just got some threads on the back, and basically there's just some, on a freewheel hub, there's just some threads there, and you just screw that on. But the bearings that allow it to freewheel, that allow the bike to roll without pedaling, they're actually in the freewheel itself. But this wheel here, this takes a cassette. So the bearings that allow it to freewheel are actually built into the wheel. So see that there? That's your bearings. There's your cassette there. You see there? That's just a solid chunk of metal. So there's no bearings in that. So when you're putting that on, this just slides over that, and that's what allows it to freewheel.
Cool. Well, and what's the difference between the two now?
Well, the bearings are in the wheel in this one.
Yeah. So is there a quality issue because you don't see free wheels on high-end road bikes, do you?
No. These are just basically cheap.
Yeah.
So these tend to be in cheap bikes. Your more expensive bikes will have this. Because they can make it lighter, because there's no bearings into the cassette there, they can actually make it lighter. They can change the quality of the gears, and you actually can get more gears onto this. Yeah,
and the better quality bearings as well.
Just better quality bearings. Yeah. And you can actually service the bearings unless you kind of service them.
Yeah. Okay.
And if you have a free wheel on your bike and you switch it for a cassette, say if you buy a new wheel, is that a possibility, or will that take all your gears out of alignment?
If you're changing from a freewheel to cassette, normally cassettes will have more gears. You can get 7-speed cassettes, that's as low as they go, but you can actually get 8-speed freewheels too. So you can change them if it's like for like. So if your bike's got 7, so when we talk about speed as well, we only talk about how many gears are on the back of your bike. It's not important how many is on the front of your bike. So if you ask for a chain, it's specific to how many gears you've got, because a 9-speed chain needs to be thinner to accommodate more gears on the back. So you can change between a freewheel and a cassette, but you want to do like for like. So if it's a 7-speed freewheel, you want to make sure it's a 7-speed cassette you put on it. But then you might just have to, some of it might be different, you just need to set up your derailleur again to accommodate that.
Yeah. And obviously the whole wheel has a change. So it's a freewheel wheel and a cassette and wheel with free hub. So,
but if you can upgrade it, you could upgrade it and say put a 9-speed on it, but you would then have to change your derailleur and your shifters to match in with the 9-speed as well. So you can do it, but you just either need to keep everything the same, or you need to change lots of stuff.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So we've covered pretty much. We've actually covered a bit more than we thought we were going to cover, to be honest. It's now, we've got 1:15. So we've got 10, 15 minutes of questions. Would that work, or is there anything specific? Has anyone got anything specific about specific things they want to ask Neil about right now, and he'll do his best to answer those questions in the next 5, 10, 15 minutes. So fire away, guys.
Ask quickly, how do you measure the seat height and handlebar height for a good riding position?
Right.
Let's do handlebar height first, because that's probably the easiest one to do first.
Okay. Right. I'm going to put this at stand. So you've got two types of stems. You've got what's called an A-head stem, which is what this is, and you've got a quill stem, which is what that looks like. So your higher end and more modern bikes have this A-head stem, and your older bikes, maybe some hybrids, some of your lower quality bikes will have this here, the quill stem. So this type here, the A-head, the handlebars height-wise, because basically the way this is attached to the bike is there's a tube that comes up from the fork all the way up. Now that tube actually all comes pretty much up to the top here. So so you can't make that tube any longer to raise the handlebars on this height, on this bike. The only thing I could do is, I don't know if it's hard to see, but there's actually spacers here below this stem. I could adjust the order of the spacers, so I could take this off and then put maybe one of these spacers on top of the stem to lower the handlebar, but I can't get it up any higher than that because this tube isn't long enough.
There is an awful looking thing that I saw on the internet, on Facebook, where it basically is an A-head extension, but I've got a feeling that would be really dangerous. So I would not recommend it at all.
Yeah, you can get extenders that go on top. Obviously, cheap ones can be dangerous, but if you've got a good quality one, there's nothing wrong with them.
Yeah, the one on Facebook was like...
yeah. But if there's one for £3, then buy that one. It's probably going to be
that was the one. Yeah. How about the A-head? You can lift the A-head, can't you?
The A-head, the quill stem.
The quill stem, I've got the bike.
This one, you can lift it up. Now, the bolts in these are different, okay? So let's talk about that first. On this type, you see it's got bolts on the side. Now, the way that works, this bolt on top, that pulls the fork together, and that actually adjusts the headset, so you don't want to touch that. Well, unless you're adjusting the spacers. So you undo these bolts to loosen the stem. But with a quill stem, the bolt is actually on the top. Like that. Then you can undo this.
Sorry, it's the sound's gone there. Just repeat that. We've got to quill stem.
Yeah, so the quill stem. So to change the quill stem, go on.
So with a quill stem, the bolt for adjustment is actually on top. That doesn't adjust the headset. So you can undo that, and basically you see the way this works is when you tighten that bolt, this wedge moves up, and it just basically jams itself on the inside of the fork, and that's what holds it in place. So you can undo that bolt and then move it up to your desired height, but all seat posts and stems, the quill stems, all have these little fence post marks. So that's your maximum safe height. So you can put it up to that height, but you don't want to go any further. Because if it's any further than that, I've actually seen bikes come in where you can actually see this quill. It's sitting basically up. And because that's not all the way down, it can basically wobble. Worst case scenario, something happens, you put a lot of weight on it, either this can snap, or it can damage here, or it can just come out. But again, when you're done and you've tightened that and set it to your right height, check it the same way as we did with them, check, make sure that's tight enough. But just make sure you can't see the marks. Does that make sense?
Cool. Saddle height then?
So saddle height. I think it's a formula actually. 2 seconds. So saddle height. It depends on the person where they might want to saddle. But roughly, if they're confident, it should be about hip height. So if I was doing this for me, now obviously I'm very confident on my bike, so I like to be right up on my tiptoes. So I have a little bit more than that, but actually that's about right. So if I have to stop, I just slide forward if I have to. But what you're basically wanting to do is when you're pedaling the bike,
pedal backwards a couple of times, and when you're at the bottom of your pedal stroke, you want just a slight bend in your knee, maybe about 10-15 degrees. You don't want, if it's too high, hips will start to rock, you'll sort of feel yourself overextending. Now if you do that, you can actually, basically you get a sore lower back, because your SI joint is basically doing that and it rubs against each other, and that's when you get lower back pain. But same thing if you have it too low. So minimum, when we're teaching someone to ride a bike, if it's a child and they're not confident, or even if it's an adult and they're not confident, you want them to be able to sit down with their feet flat on the floor, but as they get confident, lift their pedals up. The saddle up, sorry. The reason for that is, if it's too low, then basically you're only ever sort of doing that, and you're never fully extending the leg. So it's almost like a build-up of fluid happens in your knee, and then it basically feels like your knees wants to pop off, and that's when you get knee pain. So if you're getting knee pain, you need your saddle up.
Yeah, as a bicycle recycling charity, we often get bikes come in and the customer will say, oh, I'm bringing it back in because my knees hurt. And Neil or I will take them outside, lift their saddle about 5 mil, get them to ride around and say, oh, it doesn't hurt anymore. Buy them. Yeah, it's literally, it can be literally 3 to 5 mil. So it can be a bit more. It's really, really low. But you really don't want to go a distance with a low saddle, because you will put huge pressure on your tendons under your lower kneecap and your patella, and that's where you get that pressure build up.
And you also get, it ends up, I find, to get the jelly legs a lot easier.
Yeah,
if your saddle's up, because you're full extending, you've got more power, and you can cycle further, faster, for longer. Yeah,
because if your saddle's low, you're using quadriceps, and if your saddle's high, you're using your hamstrings and your glutes, which are much more powerful muscle than you for long distance. That's the more aerobic muscle. Your quads are really good for power, but they burn a bucket more energy and oxygen. So, right. Any other questions? That was a really good question, by the way, Chris. Heights and saddle heights. By the way, if you got like sore shoulders and stuff, that's another one we get. Anything? I want my handlebars up. There's not much you can do. With the handlebars are pretty much set. You've got a couple of mil here and there. You probably want to look at the type of bike you're riding, rather than, and also you want to think about the strength of your core, because realistically, you're not meant to put a massive amount of pressure on the handlebars. The handlebars aren't designed for you to lay on, to put your body weight on. Your core's meant to lock, and you're meant to have a very light touch on the handlebars.
There's a way, if you go and like get a bike fit, and they will get like set squares out and stuff like that, and they'll measure the angle between your, try to get somewhere that can balance and your hands. They'll measure the angle between basically your back and your arm going down. And I'm sure it was about, what, 90 degrees?
It depends. Depends on the type of work you're doing on the bike. But you'll often, sometimes another thing you'll hear is people saying their fingers go numb. It's called cyclist palsy, and it usually starts your little finger goes numb first. That's quite normal if you're putting a lot of weight on your handlebars and if you're keeping your hands in one place. You want a bar that you can move your hands about on. If you're going distance, you want that's why roads are quite good, because you can ride in the hoods, you can ride in the flats, you can ride in the drops. So you're moving your hand continually on the bar. That's why you sort of get touring bars on some of the touring bikes that have gone, so you can almost go into like a TT position at one point, and then you can sit up, and then you can so realistically, if you're doing distance on a bike, if you've got straight flat bars and your fingers go numb, that's why you're putting too much pressure. It's almost like carpal tunnel syndrome, and it can be quite bad, because you can actually end up with causing severe damage to that nerve, and it can be, you actually lose that finger for good.
And angle in the brake levers as well.
Yeah, angle, overreaching the brake levers, or if the brake levers are too low and you're stretching your wrist over the brake, over the handlebars.
And if they're too high, if say the brake lever was up there instead of down there, you'll see with the brake lever set the way it is, I can have my fingers straight and it goes all the way up to my shoulder. So all the forces get dissipated all the way up my arm and up through my shoulder. Whereas if the brake levers are up like that, you see how it changes the position in my wrist. And it means that the wrist is going to take any impacts more than anything.
So let's talk about some more technical aspects of the bike. So we've talked about braking, we've talked about wheels and tubes, we've talked about things. We've not really talked about gears today. We've not really had time to talk about gears. We've got literally a couple of minutes left. Has anyone got any questions about either what we've covered or gears? Anybody out there? Silence.
They're muted.
I guess if someone's typing, then just another quick one. Can you just show us where you can find the information if you need to buy a new tyre or inner tube, where you can
Good question.
find
Yep.
Good question.
Same place as it tells you the pressure of the tyre. It's actually written on the side of the tyre. It can be hard to see sometimes. So where is it? Where is it?
So the one side,
It's on this tyre. It's written really small. So I don't know if you can see that there, but it actually says 26 by 2.0, and it's right next to where the pressure part is. Now, Schwalbe are bad for this. They put the size on in really tiny letters, but quite often it'll be in big letters written along the side there. So when you get a tube, it'll maybe say 26 by 1.5 to 2.175. So that tube will do any tyre between 1.5 inch and 2.125. But if you're out and say you've got a 2.3 and it says it only goes up to 2.1, it'll be fine to use because it'll expand. It's not ideal, but it's still going to expand and it'll still work if it's not quite right. So if you've got nothing else, then just use that one because it will expand. But ideally, you want your tyre to be somewhere in that range for the tube.
And also, you've got to realise what the difference with a tyre and a tube is. The tyre is the casing, and the casing needs to hold its shape. The tube is to push it into that shape and hold it in that shape. So if you've got an inner tube that will hold it to that shape so it can do its job, happy days. So if it is too big, theoretically, it's still going to hold it to that shape. It's not going to change the shape dramatically unless it's a really, really big inner tube, in which case it might bubble it slightly outwards.
An inner tube won't actually build up pressure without a tyre on it. If I was to get my pump put in a tube, it would just keep expanding until it exploded. But the gauge will still only register maybe 1 or 2 psi. But so it's not until the tyre's in place and it's holding it in place that then the pressure actually starts to build inside.
Yeah.
So I have actually put like a 24-inch tube and a 26-inch wheel before, because that's all I had with me, because I sometimes with kids. But it got me home.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. We've had a question about spokes. How to adjust spokes?
How to adjust spokes?
That was from Roddy.
Right. Well, you need a spoke key for that.
And you've got literally a couple of minutes and then we'll...
So, to adjust spokes, you need a spoke key. Now, there's lots of different types of spokes as well. So these are just your normal sort of standard spokes. Sometimes road bikes have bladed spokes, but I'll just leave that just now. So, but most bikes will have just your sort of standard round spokes. So you see these bits here, they're called spoke nipples. So if your wheel's buckled to one side, the way that it works, okay, so you see the spoke here is on this side and you've got the spoke here on that side. What you want to do, if the wheel's buckled, say it was buckled that way, I will want to tighten up the spokes at the buckle on this side of the wheel, because as I tighten that up, it pulls the rim back that way to try and make it straight.
So I go in front of the wheel. Try that again, Neil. So just from there.
So if the wheel was buckled that way, I want to tension the spokes on this side to then pull the wheel back straight towards that way, if that makes sense. You always work in threes though, with spokes. So if I look for somewhere there's a wee buckle. Right. So there's a wee buckle there. So it's actually buckled in that way. So what I would do, so what size is it? I think it's this one, right? So, yeah, that's the buckle there. So it's buckled here. So, and it's buckled in that way. So what I want to do is I just want to tighten up these spokes here. And that will pull the rim that way and just loosen that off ever so slightly. But, so this here just slides on over the spoke if you've got the right size. There you go. So it's not a huge buckle, so I'm only going to give it a wee half a turn. And the way you have to do this, okay, when you're tightening it, it's not your right to tighten. You can imagine you've got a screwdriver on the back, because the actual nut is in here, it's just you can't get to it. The actual screw is here, but you can't get to it because of the tube, so you can turn it that way. So you have to imagine you've got a screwdriver here, so to tighten that from the back of the screwdriver, I'd be turning it that way, so I turn the spoke key that way. I give that a wee turn there. Again, another, oh, that's the wrong spokes. I actually want to loosen this one. So give that a wee quarter of a turn, and then I would do a half turn on this one. The reason for that is whenever I'm screwing that in, you're bringing it down a little, you're pulling the wheel more towards the centre. So you want to so you have to loosen this side to try and make sure that the wheel stays round. Because if I just tightened all these spokes, I'd end up with a flat spot. Does that make sense?
Perfect. And I'm hoping that answered your question, Roddy. We haven't really got time to go through that in any detail. All these bits and pieces we've covered are available on lots of different videos. I would recommend looking at some of the tool websites like Park Tool, which are very good. For the discs, look at the makeup, the manufacture of your disc, and then look on their particular videos, and they will work really well. For the M-Check, if you look on Cycling Scotland's, Bikeability Scotland's website, there's a good M-Check video there. There's also a good one on Cycling UK. So Cycling UK, Cycling Scotland, and any of the manufacturers' websites and tool websites like Park Tool would be my top tips. We are looking, hopefully, we'll apply for a grant to do some videos, and we'll be doing a lot more of these. And we might even do some more with you, Chris, maybe, hey, hopefully. Fingers crossed, we'll see if we can do some more with the tool libraries and stuff like that. So but for now, I think that's just about us. Is there any other final questions before we call it a day? Any other questions? It was really good to see you too, Roddy. Thank you, mate. Anybody else?
Doesn't look like it, but I just want to say a couple of things. First of all, thank you very, very much for your time on a Saturday. I think your calling is a little bit wasted. You should be a camera person, because your the camera handling skills were amongst the best I've seen on it. It was great. We do have a bike maintenance kit on the tool library. The code, if you want to find that out, is TS274, and you can check that out. That's got I have that kit myself. It's the one from Halfords, I believe, and I was able to service pretty much my full bike with it. So it's a great kit. It does have a spoke key in there as well. Chain link remover. We have a separate chain link remover, a giant one that's a little bit better quality. I found mine broke. I had to buy a new chain link remover than the one that came in the kit. It's got tire levers, screwdrivers, chain whips, bottom bracket removers. We didn't even go into bottom brackets. There's so much to learn on a bike that's just outside the scope of what we can do on such a short workshop. Like I said at the start, that these are usually 3 hour long, so I think we've managed to fit in quite an amazing amount in there. What do you just want to say a little bit about people bringing their bikes into you for repair, or buying a new bike from you?
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Chris. Recyke-a-bike, because of the pandemic, we're still operating an appointments system. So if you want to bring your bike in for a repair, we are very competitive, probably a bit more than competitive on our pricing. So we're very, very busy. You will have to book in through call the telephone, and we'll call you back, or drop us an email at admin@recyke-a-bike.co.uk. And then what they'll do is they'll book you an appointment to bring your bike in. There's about a 2 to 3 week waiting list at the moment, because we've got so many bikes in. And as I was saying to Chris earlier, there is a worldwide shortage of parts on some parts at the moment, due to a huge increase in cycling across the whole globe because of the pandemic. Sales are the same. Literally, we are having to book in individual people in half-hour slots to come and look at bikes, because we're still not, we're trying to be as COVID secure as possible. So anything you need, an appointment, come and see us. And we really would like you to come and see us if you've got the opportunity. Quality used bikes, reused bikes. They've all got 90-day warranty on them. They're Revolve accredited. So please do come and engage with us, and hopefully we'll be out doing more lessons and stuff soon. But let's just get through what we've all got to get through at the moment, and we'll see us at each other on the other side, hopefully.
Yeah, here's hoping. And if you don't know, the Recyke-a-bike's just past Causeway Head. Turn right out of the Causeway Head where Corriere is and just on the way to well, just before the turning to Canvas Kenneth. So they're just there. I always miss the turning, so be
You're not the only one. You're not the only one.
If you don't know where we are, Transition Stirling, we're in the old arcade. Again, we're only open Thursdays at the minute, and you do have to book a slot. You can check all the information about that on our website under what we do. But we are looking into getting a self-service system going, so watch this space for that. Hopefully within the next few weeks we'll have that up and running. So yeah, thank you. Go and do your M check and get on your bike. The rain has stopped for now, so yeah, away you go. See you later. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, and hope to see you soon. Take care.